Yeah. So last class we were talking about organizing a new venture. We talked about different types of organization structure. We talked about product departmentation, process departmentation. You can have departmentation based on function. We also spoke about matrix organization. We discussed two types of organization structure, which are mechanistic and organic structures. So we had plenty of discussions that we had on how important is organization structure to get the job done. Once you've created a new venture, you got to have the right organization structure to plan your activities properly. You need to organize your activities correctly and make sure the authority responsibility relationships are defined, that jobs are clear, and we know how resources are going to be allocated and who does what. So responsibilities are basically clear, and who takes decisions and who reports to whom. So all that is determined by what we discussed in the last class called organization structure. Now, so organization structure basically is trying to get the job done, to get the work organized, to have the right kind of coordination. So any new venture requires the right organization structure. So assuming that we have the right organization structure and we have the right people doing the right job and they clearly understand the responsibilities, they know what mandates they have and what kind of decisions they are supposed to be taking. And assuming that the organization structure is working really well for your company, that resources are allocated properly, that basically you have work organized properly. We go to the next level where we are talking about strategy. We're talking about how to control a new venture. We're also going to discuss how can new ventures survive because of competition. So today we are going to discuss what kind of competition can exist. And if you do have competition, which you definitely will have, even if you're a new venture, how do you control this new venture? How do you make it successful? And also, how do you survive in spite of the competition? So, this chapter is very, very important for controlling the venture and surviving the venture and making it strong and successful and keeping it sustainable. So, let's go to the next slide. So, strategy as an action. Now, we have goals for every new venture, like any organization. We have to define what is to be achieved. What are the goals? When we say goals, goals can be financial goals and goals can be strategic goals. Every organization, every new venture has to have strategic goals and financial goals. I think you understand financial goals. What percentage of, say, profit should we have every year? What kind of, goals that we have in terms of earnings per share? What is the kind of targets that we might have for return on investment? When we put money, we start a new venture, we're investing. And what is the kind of return on investment that we are looking for? And are we able to achieve it? And when we compare our results from one year to another year, are we making greater returns on investment? Is our profitability increasing? How do we ensure that our sales is getting better and it's contributing to increase in revenue? All revenue, earnings per share, return on investment, all profitability, all these things are examples of financial goals. So every organization must have financial goals. And then the second thing, very important thing, what are strategic goals? You got to understand, like, what do companies have in terms of strategy? Say for example, Alibaba's Ant Financials. I'm sure you're all aware of Alibaba as a company, and they have a financial division called Ant Financials. So yeah, I'm okay, Minchian. I'm happy you joined, and I've actually marked you present, so no worries, okay? And I'm happy you informed me. Thank you, and I hope the interview went on really well for you. So basically, strategic goals are goals for the future, and it tells what is that a company wants to do. And I was giving the example of Alibaba, and financials is the financial wing of Alibaba. So it's a clear, strategic goal. Alibaba does not just want to be a B2B business, but they also want to give offer financial services. Alibaba is so big because they do so many things together. They do what Amazon does and they do what other companies do. You have to put two, three companies, American companies together to make it as big as Alibaba is. It's because they have strong strategies for the future and they want to be into several market spaces. And they're also into new venture funding. Alibaba invests a lot of money into new ventures. So that's a smart thing to do because they have strong strategic perspectives. They think about the future. And that means Alibaba is on the right path. They have strong futures, and Jack Ma is a visionary leader. I mean, if you see how much they have grown in the last 10, 15 years, it's like crazy. The amount of growth that they have seen, very difficult to find companies like Alibaba grow so rapidly. It's because not about just financial goals, but because of strategic goals. And a lot of credit goes to the top leadership and also the founder who is Jack Ma. And you know more about Alibaba as an example. So to me, having the right strategy, along with financial goals, having the right strategic goals is important. Apart from having these goals, you have to ask yourself this question, even if you're having a new venture, how do we achieve those goals? The question how do we achieve? We might have goals, we might have strategic goals and financial goals, but the question is how to achieve that. When you ask this question, how, you're talking about strategy, because strategy is action. So you say, how do we attract new customers? How do we, satisfy our existing customers? How do you make sure that we are developing new products? How do we make sure we are adding value? How do we control cost? How do we make sure that we are doing better than competition? So all these questions, how, are strategies, are actions. So strategy is an important thing for you to succeed as a new venture. Strategy is important for big, large companies, medium scale companies, small companies. Every organization must figure out what kind of strategy will help them achieve both strategic goals as well as financial goals. I just want you to understand strategy is important for every organization, and strategy is important for a new venture. So that's what is the importance of strategy for any new venture, because strategy is action. Now, once you create a strategy, you're getting into competition. There are other companies who are producing similar products, or give the same value for their products and services. That means definitely you are in some form of competitive environment. So there is competitive interaction with other companies which do the same kind of business, which offer the same kind of products and services. So obviously you have to look at what their response is and what should your response be. Your strategy might not work as it is. You might have to go back and make small changes. You need to tweak it. You need to modify it because you have what is called as competitive interaction. Only when you modify your strategy appropriately, only when your response is correct to competition, only when you have tweaked your strategy and fine tuned your strategy properly, you will maintain that competitive advantage. And you have a very good chance your performance will be better. If you want superior performance, above average performance, if you want to have above average profits, you have to make small adjustments to your original strategy because of competition. And that means you're having the right response to what competitors are doing. So you just might want to understand your strategy is not something that is static, it's dynamic. You have to go back and adjust your strategy. Look at what competition is planning to do, anticipate their actions, go back and change your strategy, modify certain elements of your strategy. Some elements of the strategy might be okay, some elements might have to change, certain elements of the strategy may have to be discarded. And that's the key because your strategy should be a smart strategy. Your strategy should work for you. And your strategy should help you achieve two things: your financial goals as well as strategic goals, so that you have an advantage over competition. That's the key. Here is the word competitive advantage. You want to stay ahead of your competition. So, whatever a company like Alibaba does, they want to stay ahead of competition. They want to do better than others who are doing similar things. They want to serve more customers. They want to enter into other markets. They want to serve several, target audiences, target markets, and because they want to stay ahead, and they don't want to sit and do business in only one area. They want to make sure they are into other areas as well because they want to diversify risk. This way, they have plenty of revenue streams, and they're offsetting the risk in one particular business from what they can achieve in other businesses. And definitely, what Alibaba has done in the past, their strategy is working for them. They're staying ahead of competition, and it gets reflected in superior performance for the company, better profits for them, better revenues for them, higher demand and sales for what they have to offer. So, strategy is a very important thing to make sure your new venture or your business has a chance to succeed. And strategy is extremely important for any company, including new ventures. So, let's go back here. Now, when you think about competition, because we are all interested in competition, right? When you start a new venture, other companies will do the same thing. It's easy for them to come and do the same kind of product, deliver the same kind of services. So you might want to be very careful the way you understand how competition works. And you want to understand various elements that actually affect competition globally. So this is a model for you. I mean, this model is again not an exhaustive model. You might have other elements beyond this. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just a framework for you to understand what influences competition at the global level. That's the key. So we're trying to figure out what influences the competitive interaction. Should we attack as a company? Or are we being attacked so we need to counterattack? Or do you think cooperation is a better choice? So you don't always attack, because if you think attack is going to get you into trouble, you might choose to cooperate with someone else, some other company, your competitors. You can cooperate with them. But if you're already being attacked, how do you defend yourself, or how do you counterattack? Strategy is like war. The military employs strategy. I mean, they fight over territory, they fight over geographical territory. But in business, we don't fight over territory, but we're trying to fight over, markets and customers, and this, market share basically. But definitely, strategy comes from military operations. So you understanding your competitor's strength, figuring out and anticipating what their moves are, it will give you a better chance to react appropriately. Whether you should defend, whether you should attack, or should you counterattack, or just make friends and cooperate, collaborate. What is the best thing for you? So obviously, these are questions that you want to ask, even if you're a new venture or if you're an established company. You have to ask who else is there and what are they doing? Should we attack them, or should we create barriers so that they don't attack us? But if they're already attacking us, should we counterattack? Or we try and forge a relationship, we form a partnership. Do we collaborate with them? Does that help us? So these are questions that we are asking here. Okay, at the center is your competitive interaction. You might choose whatever you want to do, attack. Sometimes you might have to counterattack. Sometimes you might choose to cooperate. Again, that's up to you as a company. That's up to you as a new venture. Now, when you're talking about this, what influences this kind of interaction? The first one is called as, we can go to the next slide because the next slides are exactly the same thing. Okay, we'll talk about it here, no problem. So we can talk about industry-based considerations. When you're talking about any business, look at the whole industry. Suppose we say mobile phones. Look at the whole industry. When you say the whole industry, you have Apple, you have Samsung, you have Xiaomi, you have Huawei, you have Sony, you have other players who are OnePlus. There's so many players. Vivo. How many players are there in the mobile? Nokia too. I mean, they have a small market share, very very small, but they're still there. So all these companies put together is what we call industry. Now you might, of course, there are many other smaller players, global players, which are very, very small, insignificant kind of market share, but they too become part of the industry. So you want to consider industry-based considerations. What are the factors that control the industry? What are the things that really matter to us as a company when we take the whole industry together? The first one is concentration. How many players do you have? How big are they? And who is the industry leader and what the industry leader is doing? So you might want to say, what is Xiaomi doing? Are they coming up with a foldable phone? What is Samsung doing? Are they going to do better than what they did with Galaxy Fold 2? What is iPhone planning to do after iPhone 12 release launch? What is cooking? What kind of innovations will they do? What is say Huawei trying to do? What will change for Huawei if the president of the United States is someone else? What will happen when the relations between US and China become better? So there are plenty of things that you want to think when you think about the industry. Who are there? How big are they? Which markets are they focused on? Where do they focus? What kind of innovations and technologies do they offer? And who is the industry leader? These are all important things you have to consider while actually creating your own strategy, whether you want to attack, counterattack, defend your position, or cooperate. And the second factor here is product homogeneity. Now, how similar are products? Are they different? Completely different? Are they differentiated? Or are they very, very similar? If a product becomes commoditized, if there is no difference between an LG phone and a Samsung phone and an Apple phone and a Sony phone or a Xiaomi phone or a Huawei phone or a Vivo phone, if everything looks same and everything functions just the same, I think your strategy should be different. But if each of that is different, some of them are Android, some of them are iOS. I mean, the software is different, the applications are different, the quality is different, the sensors, user interface is different. So obviously there is not much. Though mobile phones look pretty much same, they almost do the same kind of functions, but they're trying to be different on several levels: hardware, physical material that goes into producing premium products, the operating system, the app store, the kind of software support that they might have, security issues, performance, durability, water resistance, you name it. You can go camera, you do all that kind of artificial intelligence that might be there, lidar sensor, augmented reality and stuff like that. So there are plenty of things that make them still different. They look similar, they look as if they're homogeneous, but there is a lot of difference between each of these product categories. So you might want to consider the whole industry elements. Stability of demand and supply. Is the demand increasing, or the demand is increasing but at a decreasing pace, or is the market saturated? Now, it might differ from one country to another. It might differ from one region to another. So you might want to look at every country's demand for a particular product and what's the supply. Order frequency and value. How frequently do people change their phones? And how much are they willing to pay? Samsung, I was reading today that Samsung came out with their Galaxy Fold 2 phone with like close to $2,000. But for China, Samsung came out with a larger phone, a bigger size phone for $3,000. Nowhere they have actually launched a bigger Galaxy Fold 2. For the rest of the world, it's one size. For China, they have two. One is the normal size Galaxy Fold 2, and they have a larger Galaxy Fold 2, which is $1,000 costlier. So they want to experiment and see whether in the Chinese market there is a demand for a larger size foldable phone. And that's their test market, because a lot of Chinese customers are rich. They can afford for a costlier phone, and they want to have a larger foldable phone like a replacement for their tab. It's multifunctional. You can have multiple windows. So they want to test their acceptance of a larger size foldable device in China, which is a smart move. Because if it works in China, that means there's a huge market. The customers are lot of customers. The customer base is big. And if you look at the number of customers who can afford an expensive $3,000 phone, that is also high in the cities at least. So it's a smart thing that Samsung, which is a Korean company, where they're trying to do is launch only a larger size phone only for China. That's a smart way of seeing the frequency, the value that customers are willing to pay. Social relationship among rivals. What's the kind of relationships that Samsung has with, say, Chinese manufacturers like Huawei, like Xiaomi? Do they have good relationship? What kind of relationship? Or they're just simply competitors? They don't have any kind of cooperation. That is important. Entry barriers. Sometimes certain countries, like for example, US right now has entry barrier. They've created barriers for Huawei. They're restricting them. They're saying you cannot use Google's Android platform. They cannot access certain, applications. They're making it hard for Huawei. It might change with the change in presidency in the U.S. That might change. And I was reading also that the U.S. government has slowly, given permission to several companies that can selectively do business with Huawei. So it's getting better. Might take a while, but the relationship between US and China, I think, is on the road to getting better, and more businesses will be, cooperating and collaborating between US and China. So I think the entry barriers are there. There are certain, sanctions against certain companies. They're being slowly, selectively, relaxed, hopefully for the good. Market commonality with rivals. How are these players common? Are they common? Are they completely different in terms of processor, in terms of operating system, in terms of durability of the device, in terms of design elements? How are they common or how are they different? These are all factors that will determine the amount of competition that exists. Then there is another important thing that we call and we should consider while taking into effect creating your own strategy is resource based considerations. What are value capabilities to attack, deter, and retaliate? Suppose if you take a company, what's their strength? What strength do they have? Are they strong financially? Or do they have access to patented technologies? Are they innovative and they're developing cutting edge technologies? What is their capability to attack? And are they capable of deterring and defending? Or are they capable of counterattack, attacking and retaliating? So every company, whether it's a new company, new venture, or an old existing company, you got to determine what resources you have. That's why it's called resource based consideration. And look at what kind of resources are there at your disposal that will determine the kind of strategy that you might want to choose in the future. And whatever resources do you have, are they resources that others can get easily, or are these resources very difficult to get, rare resources? So are these assets somebody that someone else, other companies cannot create very quickly? They're rare resources, they're unique resources, or are they resources that any company can have access to? That will determine whether you want to attack, whether you simply want to defend, or whether you want to retaliate. If you have stronger resources, unique resources, I mean, you can take a more attacking strategy. But if you're weak financially, you don't have access to certain technologies, you might try and defend and deter attacks from others. You might think about retaliating slowly eventually. But if you're very strong, you will think of attacking. What kind of resources are they? Can somebody create these resources quickly? Can they imitate them? Or will it take a long time to create? Suppose I can give you an example. For example, Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company, has a lot of patented drugs for cancer. They have the largest number of patented drugs for cancer. So, and to get the same number of patents for cancer treatment for another company like Pfizer is it's going to take a while. The same is the case with developing a vaccine for coronavirus. Say a company like Fujifilm, a Japanese camera manufacturer, they also manufacture. They're into research, creating that is, intending to create a vaccine, develop a vaccine for the coronavirus. So obviously, these are not doable in a very short period of time. You cannot create a coronavirus vaccine very quickly. But if you succeed, Moderna is working on the coronavirus vaccine. AstraZeneca is working on the coronavirus vaccine. Fujifilm is working on it. There are several companies that are working on trying to create the perfect vaccine for coronavirus. But these are resources, very unique resources. Other companies cannot do it very fast because you need smart people, you need scientists, you need skilled people, You need access to certain technologies, certain know-how, and past scientific advancements. All these matter. How quickly and how effectively you can create the best vaccine for this pandemic, the coronavirus itself. So imitability, it's an important thing. It's a resource that's not imitable. You cannot imitate and create that resource very quickly. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It might take a lot of investments and treasure to be involved in it. Organization of skills for action. See, people you might have people who are very skilled, but it's also important how you organize their skills in ways that are effective for implementing a strategy and staying ahead of competition, in trying to be competitive while interacting with others who can do the same kind of thing. So organizing skills of your people, of your employees, extremely important. And resource similarity with rivals. Are our resources very similar to rivals? If the answer is yes, maybe you will not attack because they also have the same resources. But if we have special resources, unique resources, very rare resources, we have a more aggressive strategy working for us. So that's what is about resource-based considerations. By the way, each of this is a slide in the coming few slides. So there, I will not repeat this. I'm trying to finish 3 slides with 1 slide, which is a framework here. Then there are institution-based considerations that you should consider, whether you want to be an attacking company, or you want to choose as a company a counter-attacking strategy, or you want to simply cooperate and collaborate with someone else. That also depends on the institution-based considerations. If you look at domestic competition, what is the primary competition or antitrust policy that is existing in a particular country? I think that's the key. If you're operating in the US markets, you got to understand what is the competition law here, what is the antitrust policy here. And that's a huge thing because it's an institutional driven. Whether you have Trump as the president or if you have Joe Biden as the president, it doesn't really matter, in the short term at least, because there is an institutional policy which controls, governs, and regulates competition, and which makes sure that one big company doesn't have a monopoly and that customers are not disadvantaged in that sense. So you got to understand institutional regulatory policies and law in each country, and that's an institutional based consideration. It's not about one individual. It's about regulatory framework. It's about institutional policies. Then there is a second one, international competition. Maybe there are certain countries which don't want you to sell to them. Anti-dumping policies. You might have countries saying we don't want to import certain products from certain countries. That's what we call as anti-dumping policy. So this happens across several countries. Countries which impose high taxes and tariffs for imports from certain countries. The Trump administration has been accusing China, countries like India, saying for all the American products, you guys have high taxes, and he's not happy with it. He's a business person, so he understands that when U.S. government has very low taxes for Indian goods and Chinese goods, they expect the same kind of treatment for American goods which are being exported to China or India. So this is something that every company should be aware of, especially if you're going to international markets and you're trying to compete with international players. So that's an important institution-based consideration, which will determine whether we're going to have an attacking strategy or whether a counter-attacking strategy will work best for us, or whether sometimes just collaborating, cooperating with competition is better for us. So all these factors are extremely important while moving forward. You have to figure out what works in the best interest of your company, especially if you're going international. And the third factor, which is there under institution based considerations, is norms, beliefs concerning competition and cooperation. It's basically the DNA of your company. What do you think is your own norm? What do you expect of yourself when you're talking in terms of competition or cooperation? I think it's to do with the culture of your company, basically. So, do you believe in competition, or do you think you should be more cooperative so that you can expand your business, You can make your presence felt in international markets. So it's about your own informal norms and beliefs that you have within the company, and that will determine how you're going to interact with other competitors, basically. So strategy as an action, I think I did explain most of these points, but it's not a bad thing. I can repeat this. Strategy is an interaction. So it's not simply having one strategy fits all situations. Your first strategy that you created is a forecasted strategy because you're forecasting the environment. Basically, you're trying to analyze the environment. You're trying to anticipate what kind of competition. So you created a strategy, but that will change because of your interaction. When your company starts interacting with competition, your strategy is also interactive. It's also changing. Firms like militaries often compete aggressively. So, companies are like militaries. They want to compete, they want bigger market share, they want the customers, and then they will fight it out. They want to make sure they'll survive. Military principles cannot be completely applied to business, which is true, because business is also about war as much as it is to do with peace. War is competition, peace is cooperation. So business does both. Military doesn't do both most of the times. It's like it's war, it's about war, but business is both. Sometimes you compete with the same company and you cooperate and create peace with the same company in other countries. I'll give an example. Like if you say uh, Samsung and Apple are competitors, a couple of years ago, Apple was buying the mobile phone screens from Samsung. How come Samsung actually agrees to supply mobile phone screens to Apple? They are competitors. But Samsung believes if they sell screens to Apple, they make money. Why not? So they're competitors, they're at war, and they're also helping each other, which is at peace. So it can happen in business. Right now, I think Apple depends on LG for their screens, not so much on Samsung. So they're now dependent on LG, another Korean company, for all their OLED screens for their new generation of Apple iPhone 12 series. They depend on LG for their screens. So militaries fight over geography, that's what it says, but firms compete in markets. They want market share, they want more customers, they want a larger pie, a larger share of the pie itself, they want greater profits. That's what businesses do. Markets involve products and geography too, both products and geography. I want to control this region. I want to control this market. If you like, look at, we were discussing last class, one of your friends presented Xiaomi. Xiaomi has about 26% of the India's, mobile phone market share. That's a lot. And they're doing extremely, exceedingly well. And as your friend was saying last class, many Indians think that Xiaomi is an Indian company. So that means they're really relating to the quality, the branding, and the proximity and the kind of service that they're getting. They're happy. Good for Xiaomi and good for Indian public. They can get high quality product, which is not as crazily priced as Apple. Apple is so crazily priced in India because of the taxes and tariffs. That's what people like President Trump complain. Why do you put so much taxes and tariffs? Apple cannot sell as many phones in India because of the taxes and tariffs. Now, multi-market competition. Firms engaging in the same rivals in multiple markets. You might see that's the key. Samsung has competition of from Apple in China. Samsung also tries to compete in the US, but maybe Samsung does really good in China, but Samsung doesn't do so great in US. Samsung does reasonably well in India. Apple doesn't do good in India. So the landscape of competition is different in different countries, different in different markets. That's why it's called multi-market competition. It's not easy. One strategy does not fit all markets. Each market, you might have to come up with a different strategy. That's why making a strategy, creating and crafting a strategy is such a complex thing because you cannot say a strategy which works in the US market will work in the Middle East. No. For Middle East, you might have to have a different strategy. For India, it might be a different strategy. For China, it has to be a different strategy. That's the key. So creating a strategy and implementing strategy is not the easiest of jobs. Multi-market competition may result in mutual forbearance. sometimes, when you're competing in several countries, several regions, you might see, oh, instead of competing and fighting with each other, we might actually collaborate and cooperate with each other. You tolerate the competition. So it might result that you begin to see that if you work with each other, there is use. When you come together, you can exchange technologies, you can control prices. You don't have to lose, your own profit margins by trying to reduce the price too much. So that's what we call in strategy as collusion. That's, I think, probably, yeah. Let's go. This is what we are talking: collusion and prisoner's dilemma. See, if I'm Samsung, I reduce the price of my mobile phones. Apple might be forced to reduce their prices as well. Once Apple reduces their price, Samsung might have to say, let's reduce it further. In the process, Apple will lose, Samsung will lose. But if there is some collusion between companies like Apple and Samsung, for example, they might say, oh, we are launching our flagship at $1,000. Let's have a little agreement. You guys will not launch it less than $1,000. Even your flagship should be 1,000 or $1,100. Don't go below. This might be a secret agreement between two companies. I'm not saying Apple and Samsung have it right now, but this can happen so that, price wars, trying to go do better than the other. I reduce my price, you reduce your price. I reduce my price, you reduce it further. Both of us will lose. Instead of that, let's agree on some price. This happens in the oil industry. Oil producing companies come together. Even countries that produce oil and gas, they come together to determine what should be the minimum price for oil and gas. It's called a cartel. So then those are examples, of collusion. I'm not saying they're good. Sometimes collusion can be bad. If collectively the companies come together and keep the price very high, that's bad for the customers. But collusion can happen so that you don't lose. That companies can come together and have a secret arrangement, secret agreement to control prices. So we spoke about a lot about industry characters, the number of competition that is there, concentration, who is the prize leader, industry prize leader in that particular industry, how similar are the products or how differentiated the products are, what kind of entry barriers are already existing, and it could be entry barriers that have been created by existing competitors. Sometimes entry barriers are created by countries, policies, basically. So when you study the industry, you got to study these entry barriers and market commonality. Sometimes when you're actually working with competitors, you might tolerate the other competition because you see you're competing in several markets. It might be in your better interest to cooperate than fight with each other. Collusion, that's what I was saying, when two companies come together or few companies come together to decide on how they want to price their products, how they can exchange resources. That can happen only when few firms are there. Collusion is like an arrangement, an agreement to work together. Existence of an industry price leader, that's why you think you have no choice but to cooperate. Products are very similar, homogeneous products. Stability of demand, supply, and technology. Nah, that's not changing too much. High frequency, low value orders. The people buy them, frequently, but every time they buy in small value. So in such a case, like oil and gas, you don't buy and keep it at home. Every time your car is running low on oil and gas, you go fill in gas. So but you do it frequently. So that's why oil and gas companies come together and control prices. Friendly social relationship among rival managers. All this happens because there is some strong relationship between the oil companies. Otherwise, it cannot happen. High entry barriers. Can others easily come into oil and gas business? No. Entry barriers are pretty high. High market commonality. So oil and gas companies, whether they operate in the UK, whether they have their operations in the Middle East, I think there is a lot of commonality, and that's why collusion is possible. Between companies, they have arrangements, they have agreements, either in price or in sharing market spaces. How do they control customers? They do all that because there are few companies, large companies. There's one basic leader, industry leader could be there. Demand is always stable, it doesn't go down, like oil and gas again. Customers purchase the product frequently, but in low quantums, as much as they need, not more than that. And of course, these companies are always interacting and talking and figuring out how they can help each other. It should be a win win situation, not I pull your leg and you pull my leg. It should not be a zero sum game. So, obviously, collusion is possible in certain industries and in certain market spaces. I'm sorry. And you have on the other side competition, where collusion is difficult, you need to compete. When do you have an scenario where you might have more competition opportunities and less of collusion? When you have a lot of number of firms, many firms, and you don't have one price leader. The products are very different, heterogeneous products. There's not much similarity. There is huge growth in demand. That means the market is very dynamic, and there are a lot of new customers coming in, new markets emerging, and you want to grab as much. So you don't want to cooperate with somebody, you don't want to collude with somebody, you want to compete, grab the market as quickly as possible. So that's what happens in competitive environments. Low frequency, people don't purchase, customers don't buy them frequently, but whenever they have to, they're extremely high price. The value of each order is high. Any durable product, any product which is high status product, like mobile phones, you don't buy mobile phones every day like you buy gas. So it's a low frequency but high value every time. I mean, when you buy a new phone, it's $1,000, $1,200. If you're buying the Galaxy Fold from Samsung, it's close to $2,000. But you buy it once in a year, or once in 2 years, or once in even 3, 4 years. Distant social relationship, managers of these companies don't talk, and so they don't really have one common price. Low entry barriers. I mean, if countries don't have barriers, Xiaomi will be big here. But I think in the US they're restricted. Huawei would, if there were not many restrictions, I think Huawei would outsell Apple and outsell Samsung in many of the countries. So barriers, entry barriers can be low, and that means competition is going to be high. But sometimes barriers are because of countries as well. Lack of market commonality. So there's plenty of difference between the operating system, the quality of the product, the access to application store, the user interface, security systems, performance, durability, many of these issues, there might not be too much of commonality. And that's why these companies cannot agree on one single price. So collusion is not possible. Competition will be there. Oil and gas industry, best example for collusion. Mobile phone industry, the best example for competition. I spoke about the resource-based considerations, that resources will determine what kind of strategy we have going forward. If we have resources which create a lot of value, they're valuable. I mean, our strategy will be offensive. I mean, we will be attacking. If I have resources with my company which are very rare and other companies cannot create these resources, it's not imitable, then I'm strong. I can attack. I can afford to attack. It's not necessary I have to attack, but I can choose to attack because I have access to valuable resources, extremely rare resources, and resources that take a long time to create, like patented technologies, the example of Pfizer, for example, or these companies, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and companies like Fujifilm, who are trying to come up with a vaccine for the coronavirus. Organization of skills, very important. How do these companies actually organize the skills of employees? That will determine what kind of strategy I'm ready for. Resource similarity, if I have resources which are very similar to other companies' resources, I might not choose to attack because they have the same resources. But if I have resources which are not similar, I might choose to attack. Fighting low cost rivals might be sometimes easier because you're not wasting too much of resources. Generally speaking, I added this particular slide into this chapter because for me it made more sense that I have to speak about the generic strategies. They're called the 5 generic strategies. I know some of you students are taking my BUSI 435 class, which is the business policy and strategy capstone. If you're taking that, I'm sure you can recall from that particular class that we discussed the 5 generic strategies. Among the 5 generic strategies are, how do we determine the 5 generic strategies? Because overall, competitive advantage can be pursued either By lowering your cost, that can give you advantage over your competition, or your product or service is extremely unique and differentiated. That can be a source of your competitive advantage, that you're better than competition. Either you're low cost, like Walmart, or you're differentiated, like Apple. What is that you will pursue as a strategy to have advantage over your competition? So the competitive advantage can be got either by having a low cost strategy or lower cost strategy, or by making your products and services unique and special and different, very differentiated. So there are two different approaches to getting competitive advantage. One is lower cost, the other one is called differentiation. Guys, understand that any new venture, any company can pursue either low cost or differentiation as their approach to staying ahead of competition, which we call as competitive advantage. Now, if you're applying a low cost strategy for all the, buyers, it's a broad cross section of buyers, all regions, all countries, maybe all kinds of buyers, you're applying a low cost strategy. Such a strategy is called as overall low cost provider strategy. And I think Walmart fits here perfectly because they focus on low cost every day. They're trying to say, we save our customers money. We save money for our customers. So they're following low cost for all customers. They're not trying to say which kind of customer. Any customer is the same for them. And for them, their approach is lowering the cost for all the products that they're selling. So overall low cost provider strategy is what Walmart is following because they are following low cost for every customer, no distinction across all their outlets. But if you have low cost strategy for a very narrow buyer segment, that what we call as niche market. It's a narrow buyer segment. And such a case, you're saying this strategy becomes focused low cost strategy. This low cost is not available for all buyers. The low cost is applicable only for certain buyers or certain countries or regions. I can give you the example of Ford. Ford produces a car in India called Ford Figo. And now that Ford Figo, I don't see Ford Figo in the US market. Ford Figo gets manufactured in India and is sold in India. And sometimes Ford Figo is exported to some African countries as well. So this is a clear case that Ford, for their Figo model, is following what strategy? It's only for the Indian market. It's made for the Indian market and African market. It's sold in India and sold in Africa. It's a focused, low cost strategy. It's not for all countries, not for all regions. This is very narrow buyer segment or a one region or a one country kind of strategy. And so I think that is a good example for a niche strategy, which is focused low cost strategy here. Now we'll go off to differentiation, broad differentiation. Suppose you take Apple. I think Apple fits into this as a perfect example because Apple is differentiated. The product is premium quality. The user interface is great. Their ecosystem is great. The functionality is great. Processor and performance is great. So they're very unique. All Apple users don't want to move to Android. That means it's differentiated. You value that Apple is very different in terms of quality, in terms of values, in terms of attributes and features. You feel it's different. But Apple is Apple in China, Apple is Apple in Brazil, Apple is Apple in India, Apple is Apple in everywhere. So it's for a broad cross section of buyers. And today, what Apple is doing, Apple iPhone 12 mini, and they have the Pro and the Pro Max. So they have, for everybody. So I think broad differentiation is the strategy which Apple is following because Apple is the same across all countries and regions. Then you can go differentiation, but for a very narrow market segment, which we call as niche market. And that is what we call as focused differentiation strategy. Now, when you have a strategy that you want to say, we produce this product, which is extremely unique and special and different, but it's only for few customers. It's extremely high priced, high quality, very limited in number that we are producing. It's only meant for a few customers. It's focused, extremely different. That's why it's called focused differentiation strategy. Now, what comes under focused differentiation strategy? I'll leave it to your imagination. say Maserati, or you can take Rolls Royce, limited edition cars, extremely expensive, handcrafted, very few manufactured. That's what they call limited edition. All the limited edition series of premium products, premium brands fall here, called focus differentiation strategy. You can't get it, and even if you get it, it's a high price kind of thing, high quality kind of thing. So it's different, high price, only very few available. That's why it's called niche market, but it's differentiated. That's why it's focused differentiation strategy. Now if you bring in the advantage of low cost and differentiation into something, this is a hybrid strategy. We want low cost, we want differentiation to be part of it. So we want to try and lower the cost as much as possible. It's not very cheap. It's not super expensive. It's somewhere in between. It's in the middle. It's not, it's differentiated, but it's not super differentiated. So it's in between. It's in the middle. Such a strategy we call as best cost provider because it tries to give upscale features, but for the best possible price. And the example that I can think of is Toyota's Lexus. They have a brand, of model of cars called Lexus. So Lexus fits here. It's not as expensive as Rolls Royce. It's not as premium as Rolls Royce, but still, Lexus is a very good car. It's expensive, not super expensive. It has all the upscale features that you want and you expect from a luxury car. So Lexus from Toyota fits here. It's not too cheap, it's not too expensive, it's differentiated, and yeah, so it's not limited. So in that case, it's best cost provider strategy, which takes both, tries to lower the cost, tries to give as many good features as possible. It's middle, and that's why it's called best cost provider strategy. Best type of features for the lowest cost possible. Not the lowest cost, but average kind of cost. The lowest cost possible. That's how it works. And that's why it's in the middle. That's why it's called the best cost provider strategy. So I explained to you 5 strategies. Overall low cost strategy, Walmart. Focused low cost strategy, Ford Figo, manufactured in India and sold in India and Africa. Broad differentiation, Apple. Focus differentiation, Rolls Royce or Maserati or even Ferrari. Limited edition versions. Best cost version, best cost provider strategy, Toyota, Lexus line of cars. So I tried to explain to you 5 different generic strategies, general strategies. Now there are 3 main types of attack. We're getting attacking strategies. We might attack, we might counterattack, we might cooperate. So any company, whether it's a small new venture, whether it's an established company, you might, based on the resources that are available to you, the access to unique and strong resources, you might choose to attack. There are 3 main types of attacks. One is called thrust, the second one is called feint, and the third one is called gambit. So let's talk about each of them separately. The thrust strategy. I know the example is a little dated, it's old, but it's not a bad thing to think about. See, suppose you have a target market X. Now, this target market X is being attacked, being engaged in A's target market. Whose market is this? A's market. Company A's market is target market X. So target X is a market which belongs to A, okay? And B is attacking the market of A. So what does A do? A attacks this market even stronger, even more strongly. It deploys all its resources here. It attacks the same market because it says it is mine. It is A's market. And when you have B attacking it, A will put all the resources here. When you put all the resources here, B leaves. B withdraws because there is thrust. That's why it's called thrust. Who is applying the thrust? A, because it applies all its resources to defend the target X market, which belongs to A. And because it's attacking all out, B leaves. And that's why it's called thrust. You thrust all your resources here. You get B out of your market space. This is an attack. This is a strong attack from A to defend its own, markets. And therefore, because it's so strong attack, B leaves. Says no need of staying here. Then there is a second kind of attack, which is called feint. Now, when B is attacking A's market, which is X, you know what A does? A will attack Y market, and Y market belongs to B. So when B company is attacking A's market, B will attack, A will attack basically B's market. So B is attacking A will attack B's market. And obviously B's market is now up for attack from A. So B actually goes back and tries to get control of their own market, leaving A's market. So A can come back here. So this is called feint attack. It's not directly trying to attack the same market which it wants to keep, but it is attacking B's market, which is Y. And B says, oh, you're attacking my market. Let me go and defend it now. So B comes back here, put all its resources here. A will come back here to their own market and increase their influence in X, which actually originally belongs to them. That's what is called as feint. And the last one is called gambit. This is a little tricky. You might want to read this closely after I finish teaching this. I know it, I wish I could have explained it here in physically in-person class. Explaining it over Zoom is not that easy. Now, we're talking of X, which belongs to A. Now, B is attacking A's market, which is X. You know what A does? A is leaving Y market. Y belongs to B. A is leaving. When A is leaving, Y market, which belongs to B, B finds a reason to go into Y market and put all its resources there because A is leaving and Y belongs to B. So B is going back and focusing there. Let B wants to think, let us put all our resources in our own market because A is leaving. It's an opportunity for us to go and strengthen our own market because they left A and they went back to Y market. They left X market and they went back to their own market. A will come back to capture X market. This is a smart move. A is leaving, giving an opportunity for B to go back to their own markets. And because they left, A is coming back to X, which is their own market. This is called as gambit. And there's an example, Gillette fights BIC in lighters and razors. So there are plenty of examples of how companies use interesting attack techniques to regain their own markets, to strengthen their influence in their own markets. So this is called as gambit, one of the attacks. So attack is three main types: thrust, feint, and gambit. And you can counterattack. You can use any of these techniques for counterattacking. Now, the key is you should determine if you want the attack to be subtle, that rivals are not aware. This is the key. You should not let your competition be aware of what your strategy is. It should be subtle. You have to do things so that you don't get noticed. It's like fighting a war. You don't want to give warnings to your competition. So you have this attack which is very subtle. Or you also have to ask this question: is the attack market of marginal value? Why do I want to go to a market which is so small? I don't want to waste my resources and attack a small market. I want to attack a market which is of more value. So don't waste your resources attacking a small market. When you're putting an attack on a competitor, you want to make sure that that market is big and huge value. Yeah, strong capabilities are required for counterattacks. If you're not capable, the larger company is going to destroy you. Either they will buy you out, or they'll acquire you, or they'll simply obliterate you from the market space. So resources extremely important for sustaining the attack itself. Okay, so we go back to the next slide here. Cooperation and signaling. It's not necessary always we are speaking about attacking and counterattacking. Sometimes it may be better for cooperation. Suppose I want to do business in China. I'm an Indian company. I want to do business in China. I cannot do business straight away in China. It's difficult. So the best thing is cooperation. If I can partner with a Chinese company, I have market entry. I'm seeking peace with the Chinese company. Communication via governments, Indian government, Chinese government might talk and help, this cooperation. We can form a strong alliance. We can reduce cost. My Indian company can reduce cost and sell products in China. To be honest with you, between countries, If cooperation is to be achieved, it has to be economic cooperation. If India and China work together, I think both the countries stand to benefit instead of fighting with each other like the way they are doing right now. So I would think economic benefit is there for all countries. So that cooperation as a strategy between companies and between countries is the key to making sure that people of both the countries benefit. So this can be a strategy for new ventures, for large companies, and also for countries. The last slide here, I believe, a strategist, somebody who's making a strategy, has to be extremely smart. You got to understand that strategy is the key for every company's success, because strategy has this power of destruction. You can destroy competition, you can destroy all kinds of obstacles ahead of you if you have the right strategy. And to thoroughly understand the nature of your industry, that industry itself, that's the key. You cannot create the a strategy which is effective unless you understand the nature of your industry. Whichever industry you're operating, you might be into pharmaceuticals, you might be operating in the mobile phone industry, you might be in augmented reality, you might be into gaming, or whichever industry you're working, you have to understand the nature of your industry to strengthen capabilities that effectively let you compete and cooperate. Unless you have capabilities, see, when you combine resources in ways that create competences, you combine resources in ways that create capabilities, only then you can either compete or you can cooperate. But if you don't have competences, you don't know how to use your resources, you don't know how to organize the skills of your employees, how are you going to compete? How will you even think of cooperating? Both are not going to be possible. So the key is to understand that you have resources, use your resources, combine resources, create unique capabilities, unique competences. Distinctive competences can create distinctive advantage for you. Then you can compete or cooperate. Also, you got to understand the rules of the game governing competition. Sometimes you might compete with the same company in certain regions, in certain areas, you might cooperate with the same company. So understand the rules. Sometimes you're friends, in another area, you're enemies, you're fighting with each other. Apply the four fundamental questions that we spoke in the previous slide. Is the attack subtle? Are the rivals aware of it? Is the attack on the market which has some substantial value? And do we have strong capabilities to either attack or counterattack? You want to ask these questions and look ahead as much as you have to reason back. So learn from the past, collect data as much as you can, because everything should be driven on data. All decisions that will happen in the future are dependent on the kind of data analysis that you do. So collecting data from your stakeholders, talking to your own employees, maybe engaging suppliers, engaging everybody who's involved in the value chain and the logistic supply chain that you have. Getting that kind of data to determine your future decisions and strategies is the key. So, as much as you plan for the future, it should be based on strong foundations. And strong foundations are only possible if you take into consideration all the data that's required. So, continue to engage, collect feedback, watch what's happening in the environment, then analyze, and then create a strategy moving forward. So, that's the chapter. Okay, thank you. And definitely, if you have questions, you can feel free to ask me.